Okay, well, thank you all for jumping on to the Houston DevOps Meetup for the month of August. We've got, of course, a fantastic meetup scheduled for you today. I want to kick things off by talking about what the Houston DevOps Meetup is. The Houston DevOps Meetup is about community. It's about the developer community, specifically in Houston. I am not a native of Houston. I'm a native of Pittsburgh, but I got to Houston and back in '79 as soon as I could, right? And what I find here is a bunch of fantastic professionals, a bunch of people that are awesome in what they do. And the more that I talk to people in the IT industry, the more I'm convinced that the cloud is the most exciting thing that's ever happened. But boy, it can be challenging. And the more that we engage with this thing, we see that things are moving fast. See that things are moving so quickly, and we need to be able to stay ahead of it. And the only way that we can do that well is by developing a lot of connections, developing that network. I came back from the the Austin DevOps Days conference in 2016 and wanted to set up something here in Houston and noticed that nothing was going on. So I set up the Houston DevOps Meetup in response to that. I want to see Houston become that leader, that thought leader, that development center that I know it could be, because like I said, there's just a bunch of fantastic professionals down here. We get together, and the cool thing about the Houston DevOps Meetup is that, yes, things are happening fast. Yes, there's a lot of things out there. Yes, you can pick any number of tools. You can go out there and you can set up 7 different tool chains on any given day, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be able to do it. The cool thing about the Houston DevOps Meetup is that whereas I might not know how to set up that Kubernetes cluster, I can guarantee you I can get you in touch with somebody who can, because I know the people that do that. I might not know how to do that infrastructure as code component that you need for whichever one, Terraform or whatever, but I will know somebody that can do that. So that community, not necessarily having to know everything, but knowing somebody who does know. Sometimes it is as simple as knowing which buzzwords to put into Google. And all of a sudden, bang, you've got your answer. So the Houston DevOps Meetup, we're about community. We're about getting together. We're about being honest about kind of where we are, what we're good at, and just sharing. So we do this monthly. It is free. And I hope that you enjoy today's presentation. With all of that, I will hand it over to the guys from Morpheus Data, and they can tell you about what they're doing and kick us off.
Great, thanks, Dan, and we appreciate the opportunity to come on board. So I'm James with Morpheus Data, and I have my 2 engineers, my local engineer Alex, and then my field CTO Adam Hicks, who is going to present on being able to move faster as DevOps is really geared around speed, moving quicker, but also doing that without breaking things, which is that's the tricky part. So a lot of enterprises start to move quicker, and they find that things begin to break when they try to piece them all together. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Adam to kind of talk through our value points there.
Awesome. Thanks, James. Appreciate you guys having me on today, and hope you're having a good evening. I'd like to start off, and I think, Dan, you're the one hosting with a little share of a PowerPoint presentation just to help me set the stage and give me something to talk through. What I like to do is just talk a little through some of the concepts. This is a DevOps group. DevOps is a broad subject. I don't need to belabor all the finer details of what that is and what that means. But I do want to talk a little bit about, when you're trying to introduce a DevOps culture to help increase velocity, how some of the things can break down. I want to jump then into a product demo, show off, our product. So we work for Morpheus Data, of course, and talk about how we can help alleviate some of those ills that may come as you're trying to move more quickly. So moving fast without breaking things is the title of this. So let me see here, make sure I got the right thing. So the first thing I like to talk about is self-service. Self-service is kind of an important aspect of the cloud. And when AWS hit the scene back in late 2007, early 2008, that was one of the most exciting aspects of it, was that now developers could get their hands directly on the infrastructure. And before I go too much deeper, let me start by saying breaking things in and of itself is not necessarily all bad. You don't know where the problems are until you do. Things are going to get broken. From a development and a DevOps perspective, you want adequate feedback loops, and you want speedy enough pipeline so that you can get the fix in there. You don't necessarily want to be afraid to break things per se, but you want to be able to heal very quickly. But when we start thinking about the enterprise space, breaking things is not necessarily just about the application. It's not necessarily about the business logic that you're writing and you're trying to get out there to your customers, the behavior that they expect. It can be much bigger. It can be much worse. It can be 6 months from now when the auditors come down from, name your 3-letter or 4-letter acronym government agency and start asking about your compliance, your change management records, and you don't have them because you were trying to move more quickly and give people ways to heal what broke. So when we think about breaking things in the enterprise, it can be a much stickier problem. It can be about how do we allow people, the benefit of self-service, but at the same time, we don't totally break the posture we have for not just availability of the application, but for business compliance, business needs, change management, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a much broader topic. So self-service, serve DevOps, or does DevOps serve self-service? And I think that's a kind of a natural place for me to start when I'm thinking about this. When, again, kind of taking me back to the origins of the public cloud, we had AWS, and it said, hey, everybody come and play. Well, all of the things I talked about, the business processes, they broke. One of the ones that famously broke that we are all familiar with is budget. It broke budget bad in a very serious way. We're in a space called cloud management platforms, as Gartner has identified it. What I hope you find when I get to the product piece is that we are a little bit different than a traditional CMP, but there's an aspect of the CMP that has been developed out just to provide that cost visibility, control, governance, and even some analytics to help improve the decisions that people make in the cloud. So that's certainly an aspect of it that has come into play to help with that ailing area. But I ask a bigger question, which is how do I not just come in after the fact and tell people where they've gone wrong, but help them from making the mistakes in the first place. So this is kind of a slide that I frequently use in talks like these. You guys are pretty familiar with this. I don't necessarily want to belabor the point of what DevOps is, but I do want to at least get down to one of the core concepts that we're talking about here. Again, is self-service, and what is it that we're really trying to drive through. So the intent-based application topology, what it is that the developer wants, the needs, or even the customer, and what's happening. How is automation, whether it's a framework, it's scaffolding, something like Kubernetes, or you're using cloud native services, or you've got some built out automation orchestration. You need to make sure it's governed, it's change managed, and the outcome is that you have a continuously deployed and delivered application, meeting those customer needs, meeting the SLAs of your application, but it's meeting all of those business needs as well. So the challenge, of course, is the need for speed. You guys can develop out a pipeline in a bubble very easily, and you can iterate on your application. But when you say, hey, I want to go push this new change out, you hit a bottleneck. It slows down very quickly. And so again, going back to this public cloud idea, that's what we ended up seeing with some of these other CMPs, is that it actually, instead of helping, it actually caused a little bit of a bottleneck. And people said, we can't keep making up for this on the back end and right sizing after the fact. We're going to have to put some governance in place up front. So it still has the appearance of self-service, but it's actually going to have to go through change approval. And I saw this, I'm sure some of you guys have seen this in your career, but it slowed things down. So all the purported benefits of public cloud very, very quickly diminished. I'm seeing a very similar thing in Kubernetes right now in that space as I've seen it. So there are some ways to solve those problems, but they can be quite challenging. As we all know, this is really what we're talking about when we're moving quickly inside that bubble. But what we tend to forget very fast is what's happening around it. So of course, you know, Hark, the Cloud Beckons, I've been talking about this. And the problem is in the Wild West, people died young. And that's what happened with AWS as well. And of course, Azure. And the reason why is because it is so hard. It's so hard to make sure that all of those needs are being met. And we see them organizationally too. You know, how do I make sure that I've got the right people in there to support it? How do I make sure the costs are being met? Performance, how do I make sure that it's scalable, et cetera, et cetera. One of the main key characteristics that I've actually seen is that DevOps as a category is not necessarily well defined. And so a lot of businesses think, well, we'll just automate it, where we'll throw some developers at it and they'll do operations. And that's all fine and good, and they're perfectly capable at doing it. Similarly, I've seen plenty of operations people have figured out how to as code their lives. And, you know, it's not an individual problem, but it is a question of whether they should. It's the can and should problem. Having my developers write operational logic might not necessarily make sense. Having my operations personnel work like a dev does, then you might actually see breakage in some very important places that you can't tolerate as an organization. So I always try to shy away from the definition that DevOps is devs doing ops or ops working like devs. I dislike that a lot. I think, you know, I'm one of the people who goes back to the original Gene Chem idea, kind of outlined in the Phoenix Project, that really what we're trying to do here is, how do I provide the infrastructure resources in a way that's not going to break the important things? It's going to allow the developer to break what they need to break for testing, get the feedback loops in place, but the operational concerns are taken care of. They're gated, they're governed, as well as being automated. So this is kind of where we enter Morpheus, right? Because what we see is that there's so much more going on around this. We've been teasing at this a bunch before, but it's, you know, how do I make sure that the cloud services are being delivered on, but in a governed way? We're helping mitigate tool sprawl, kind of bring it all together and, you know, address it behind business processes and business process automation. So that's where Morpheus really intersects. And what we also find when we go out to our customers is that there really isn't a one size fits all. There's some great tools out there, but, you know, it really is a heterogeneous world. You know, maybe you're more lenient on Windows versus Linux, for example. Maybe you like open source versus supported. I find that there's a culture in most of the organizations that our customers are looking at. They are trying to address, is it public, is it private, is it a little bit of both, is it Kubernetes across all? Do we have commercial off-the-shelf applications that we need to care and feed for? So what Morpheus has really been designed to do, and again, you'll see this as I go through the product piece, is be what we like to call self-leveling concrete. It's going to come and fit into that heterogeneous mix of tooling that you have, and it's going to enable that purported cloud-like behavior that you know, the public cloud wanted people to think about, you know, 10, 12 years ago. So it's going to allow those users to act that way on infrastructure, but on the back end, Morpheus is, A, it's not going to care about where it has to land. We integrate with just about everything there is out there, but B, we're going to wrap in those mission critical processes that can't break. And we're going to allow the developer to get what they need done. And we're going to help meet the operations needs as well. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and I'll jump into the product. Before I do so, any quick questions just on that as a concept? I think we can do some Q&A at the end too, right?
Yeah, of course, we want to leave some time at the end for Q&A. Adam, I wonder if you have any thoughts. One of the things that has been frustrating me specifically about the topic of DevOps lately is the fact that we have to keep talking about culture. It's so annoying, right? Because we're technologists ultimately, and we like to do things, but culture is such an important part of DevOps. And I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to think, if we have to keep talking about culture, then maybe there's just something wrong with DevOps.
Uh,
Any thoughts on that?
yeah, and I think that's kind of an interesting point. I think that we too have two competing organizations, right? Dev and Ops, and kind of classically, and they're not competing because of culture. They're competing. I mean, let's go back to what is a psychology 101, where we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What it is that's going to get me the bonus if I'm a systems engineer or a systems architect is different than what's going to get me the bonus if I'm a developer. So it's it's purely rational in what it's done, right? And so you can call it culture if you will, but I like to think that really it's just that we haven't found a nice way to meet both of their hierarchy of needs, which is exactly what Morpheus is meant to do. So I actually showed this when I came to work for Morpheus. I've been here almost 4 years. And it was interesting because he took a look at this product and he said, it's DevOps culture in a box. And I know, there are other tools that have said DevOps in a box. And I thought it was kind of interesting, his perspective on it. Here we are in 2020, we're 4 years after I joined the company. And when I talk to some people and they say I do DevOps, they mean they build pipelines for release, right? They do Jenkins all day, they do CI/CD. He was looking at very much through that, again, that original lens of how this allows that hierarchy of needs to be met for developers, as well as that hierarchy of needs to be met for operations. So it's not necessarily a cultural problem. Like I said, it's how do we allow all of their needs to work in conjunction? And I think, at the end of the day, they do all have the same overarching goals. Success of their business, success, they want to drive successful outcomes for their customers that helps them either, reduce costs and reduce resource needs, and they want to do it more quickly, generate revenue, whatever it is that the application that they're supporting does. So I don't necessarily think it is a cultural problem. I think it's just that, the approach that's been had has been so siloed in terms of the need, that we need something that is a cross-functional type of way of working. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. I hadn't thought about that. So there's that, it's not just culture, it's just as much incentivizing. Because let's face it, the IT ops person just wants to sleep through the night without getting paid at 2 a.m. And the developer's got a different set of needs. Good way to put it.
Yep. Yeah. So that's why I like this this talk track so much too. The title of it, right? Moving fast and breaking things or not, right? Because I think that we got to tread that line. So I'll hop into Morpheus and I'll show you where the line is, and hopefully we can illuminate how you might be able to use a tool like this to help cross those boundaries and meet both of those needs. So I'll log into Morpheus. Now Morpheus is a software appliance. This is something that our clients, our customers are installing in their environment. This one is hosted in my Denver data center. It's a little bare metal node, 64 gigs of RAM, and it's connected out to my different clouds. It installs very quickly. So a lot of our customers will actually kind of treat it in a very ephemeral manner, whereas others will set it up in full-blown HA, really take care of it operationally. But it does tend to become the heartbeat of the organization as their development users are trying to get access into resources. I'm logged in as an admin, and so I have a lot of buttons that I can click into, a lot of things I can do. And normally what I try to do is I say the first people to use Morpheus in the organization are those ops. They're going to set it up. They're going to build it, but it is the greatest gift on earth that they can give to their developers. It's like that. If you want to talk about DevOps culture, this is the olive branch, the magic olive branch that they can go and hand them. and it's going to meet their needs. Now, I'm not going to lie, a lot of our customers, vast majority of them, are actually using Morpheus for on-prem. It allows them to take their existing infrastructure and create a cloud-like experience for those users. But plenty of them are also connecting it out to the cloud, and it allows them to develop what I call a cloud smart operational approach. Developers say they want cloud. Really what they want, again, is self-service. If you can give them self-service, and then you can say, look, you can do these, you can provision resources where you need to provision them. And if it actually is, say an AWS or an Azure or GCP service that you need to have as part of your application architecture, Morpheus will still get you there. We're not going to get in the way or diminish what you may want to do there. But we allow these organizations to meet that very important operational concern, which is, again, helping people not injure themselves up front. So I'm actually going to go over here under administration, one of my many buttons, and I'm going to go to my tenants, because what I want to do is I want to show you what a user may see, what that experience is for them. When I say it's so easy for them to get resources, the proof is always in the pudding. And I'm going to go into my subtenant here called Pied Piper. Quick snippet to, again, an operational concern is that Pied Piper is connected to SAML. It's actually Okta, represented by SAML. And what I've done is I've used that integration, and I can create roles inside of Morpheus, which are really just access control lists. It defines which features an assertion attribute has access to inside of Morpheus, and also group membership. This one's pretty light. We're not really using it, but it's there for demonstration purposes. But we do want to get across that group membership is kind of an important aspect of it. These could be business units, development teams. The fact that I can see everything logged in as an admin is because I'm a super user and I'm a member of all groups. But if I impersonate Dinesh, who's a developer in Pied Piper, he's got a very different experience. White labeled, kind of cool. It's a little trick. You can actually white label for your customers, but he can't access the admin section. He doesn't need to. You can't access infrastructure either. Savvy Watcher would have noticed that that button disappeared, so it's gone now. He's a development user. What he can see is provisioning, where he can go build applications, application workloads, and he can manage backups, logs, and monitoring across his applications and application workloads, and he can use our tools suite as well. But everything is confined to his role and the groups that he's a member of. We see alerts, we see dashboards, open instances, and if I click into the instances, I notice that these are DCRH, these are members of his org and his org only, and he can only see instances in the dev team. That's it. If he goes and filters this, adds a group channel, you'll see dev team is the group across here. So that's it for him. But what he can do, again, is build. And so Morpheus allows you to offer a service catalog out to your users. Single instances is what you're going to see here. And again, service is the defining characteristic of what these are. Sure, I have an OS, just a bare box that Dinesh can go build. He can deploy it as a VM or as bare metal. We do have some great hardware partnerships with HP and Cisco that allow you to capitalize on their APIs. We also work with Canonical's Moz product for bare metal provisioning. And there's more to come. That's an exciting area for us. But the rest of these are in various different flavors. This one can be deployed as a VM or as a container. I do have Kubernetes clusters running in all of my target clouds that I can actually go deploy that service into. So there's nothing that Dinesh could ask for that wouldn't be able to be represented in this. And we get to bring the personnel in to architect these out in a way that really works for you. So if I pick on MySQL, for example, as Dinesh, pick a group, I can pick a cloud. I'm actually going to stick with AWS today. It's going to allow me to showcase a couple of neat features in here. Name is set by a policy. Operations is taken care of. They're not going to worry about something falling out of their policy, whether they're using that for logging or just audit. You can version your technologies. And then I see under my layouts several different technology choices for how I want this to be provisioned, including cloud native. So if I want to use the platform offering from AWS RDS, I've represented that here in the service catalog offering. But I can also get complex layouts, and I can architect these out that are cross-cloud compatible. This one, this Amazon Master, it's actually going to spin up 2 AMIs, and it's going to run an Ansible playbook. Morpheus integrates with Ansible, Chef, SaltStack, and Puppet. We can do PowerShell. You can just use Bash scripts, Python, anything you like, and that's a big area that I can show you more in a minute. Point is that you can deliver as a service type of offerings across your clouds, because I can take that same workflow that's going to go configure master services using our DSL on those, and I can apply that workflow to VM templates that are being spun up in my own data center. So again, lets you be cloud smart. Picking my plan changes my pricing, and I hit this tooltip and I see that maybe in this case, it would have been cloud smart of me to do the same thing in VMware today instead. So that alone is sort of powerful. You're, again, letting operational needs be met for people making intelligent placement decisions, yet you're still giving them control to do this. This is actually all governed as well. I can set hard caps for Dinesh. I can say, hey, he's not allowed to provision something this big. And in fact, I think I have, we'll see if I'm right. You can set hard budgets on price. You can t-shirt size the plan offerings that your users have to see in front of them. Kind of confine them to specified subnets. Trust me, there's a lot more that are actually available out there in our VPC. I can cap him on how many disks he can add and the size of volumes. All of this falls under governance. Make required user input passwords. These can also be exported as tags. So you can enforce a tag policy across your clouds. But Dinesh gets some awesome automation. It'll create his user on the box, set him up, and every member of his engineering group, so he has access. He can push a DNS record, Route 53, Power DNS, Microsoft DNS, we support them all. Environment variables, if you wanted to make sure that there were some there, we actually do push a selection of them. If Dinesh had access to load balancers, he could expose a port this way, and maybe a TCP port. ACI, I'm not going to use ACI, but we could do ACI in application-centric mode. We can work with NSX, so we could do dynamic network provisioning too. All governed. Workflows that Dinesh may want to run, open up a firewall port, email somebody, those are completely configurable, very powerful. You can even deploy code. In our deployment section, I've uploaded just a SQL file, but we could get it from a Nexus or a Git repo as well. If Dinesh had access to a load balancer, this is where it would show. I could go build that VIP dynamically. Again, an easy thing to do in AWS, in Azure, and GCP, but we're allowing you to do it across your clouds in sort of a similar fashion. And in fact, everything that I'm doing, I can do through an API call. I don't have to do it with the GUI. I can do it with an API call and make this request. Some of my best customers are doing that, whether it's front-ended through something like a ServiceNow, or it's front-ended through a Jenkins, and it's just part of a pipeline. And I can go ahead and I can create. It looks like I did have permission to go provision these with those plans today. So it'll go and it'll spin up. Once Dinesh wants to get a little bit fancier, and he says, hey, you know, being able to spin up a database on demand is nice, but I actually have applications that I need to care and feed for. We do allow for advanced application modeling. I said that the one that I just spun up was defined by AMIs and you know, VM templates on the back end, but you can actually bring in app structures that are defined. Maybe I'll call this one a cache tier. And I want it to be, oh, that's right, Dinesh doesn't have access to that. Pop out of the tenant just because I want to go back to where I've got some power to show and tell. But if I pop into the SPUD here, same application that Dinesh has access to play with, but he wants to add a cache tier like this. He can pick something like Elasticache, cloud native service. The way I actually built this one is instead of a wrapper around an AMI object and a playbook, it's a CloudFormation template. And we'll actually parse input values as well as push output values that can be consumed by other tiers in the application as you connect them. So the wizard in each of these looks very similar to what I just showed you for Dinesh provisioning a single service, only what I've done is I've actually spun up 3 environments that live next to each other. I've got a test on VMware, I've got a dev environment on Azure, and down here's a demo on AWS. We can even help you handle things like scaling. I go to my Tomcat tier, we can do scaling and set scaling thresholds, whether they're Morpheus and it's abstracted, or it's the cloud native scaling that's behind the scenes. So this Azure ARM, as well as CloudFormation, or even Kubernetes manifests. And in my AWS configuration, what you'll find is that I can do this as, say, like a MySQL container and specify a resource pool, which is just a namespace. So you can start doing hybrid technologies as well. Depending on who's authoring these, they can lock fields, make this self-service for the developer to go create this application or include in a pipeline, call it with raw code. We do have a Terraform provider that we're working on as well. So you can get into those patterns of usage that something like a Terraform affords you, and GitOps and all that comes with it, but Morpheus can be your cloud abstraction endpoint. Now, I talked a little bit about governance and RBAC, and just to show you a section that Dinesh didn't have access to, and I want to drill into this a bit. And actually, I'll come in by way of groups. So we build on a lot of abstractions around organizing these cloud resources. So this is going to meet their needs. So Dinesh can get his applications, his hierarchy of needs is met, but I want to make sure that my VMware admin, he's not upset that it's being put in the wrong place. So it starts with groups for us. I can go and take a look at the clouds that have been exposed into my demo group. It's a big list. We demo to everybody. Nobody has a list like this. I promise you, if you're feeling a cloud inferiority complex as a vendor, don't feel bad. But if I click on something like VMware, and this is one of those ones that rubs people quite a bit, right? You're talking to the VMware admin and he says, how do I make sure they're not going to put a development entity on my production network? Well, that happens in here. We synchronize in all the resources we find. We make it very easy to integrate with clouds and cloud infrastructure. And we synchronize in the resources, and just through a nice little wizard, I can decide who has access to these, whether it's a group or a tenant. I can do the same thing across all the resources we bring across. In the case of VMware, my data stores, my resource pools and folders. I can also build out integrations to other things like load balancers, all of my load balancers here, and then I can build consumption for them. You're seeing that some are private, some are public. Some are assigned to tenant Morpheus. As you saw when I was Dinesh, none are assigned to tenant Pied Piper. He didn't have access to any of these load balancers. So you can allow people to build load balancers for load balancing their applications in a very dynamic fashion. Other network constructs that we do this with. So SDN, ACI, NSX, IPAM, Infobox, Blue Cat, PHP, IPAM, SolarWinds, even security. We can integrate. We've got integration with Unisys Stealth, Cisco ACI, DNS services. So these are all automated. Again, they're cared and fed for without the Dinesh's of the world, the developers of the world having to think about it. It just happens. If I go look at my networks here, where I showed you, I can create the RBAC on them. But maybe if I hop into, I'll just pick on a VMware VLAN. I can actually go in here and choose a network pool from an IPAM provider and create some settings so they can be statically addressed as those machines come up. Don't have to worry about the user not statically addressing correctly. We can alleviate that bottleneck that typically happens that we see where a user requests a VM and then it has to go through getting an IPAM, getting a DNS entry and everything else. So again, true end-to-end self-service in a very nice fashion. Also, when we start talking about self-service, to me, one of the most important parts is, and I said this at the start, is that feedback loop. I want to make sure that the developer, when they're controlling their applications and their application workloads, they have what they need. I don't necessarily want to take that away from them. I may have my own panel to go look at from monitoring VROPs. I may have some cloud native stuff that I'm using for monitoring and logging, but I want to give them an insight as they go push code that they can understand what's going on from a utilization standpoint. They can take a look at their logs. And these are just service specific logs. Whereas if I drilled into the VMs behind this service, there would actually be syslog aggregation in the log section. Maybe I want to let them create and manage their own backups. You could, the Dinesh's of the world could restore or delete their own backups as they see fit. They can set scaling for themselves. So when I start thinking about DevOps and that shift left of control, this is nice for me because I can set this up in such a way, if I'm an operations personnel, that I trust that the Dinesh's of the world can care and feed for this. I'm not going to get called in the middle of the night. They're really the ones that are taking ownership and responsibility for the application workloads that are running on my infrastructure. Even things like reconfiguring, adding plans, making sure that that goes through approval workflows and everything else. So I know that was quite a bit of talking, and I feel like I've covered maybe the very tip of the iceberg when it comes to Morpheus, but I don't want to run out of time without giving the crowd an opportunity to ask some questions and have a further discussion, especially knowing you guys are facing a pretty big hurricane coming your way. So I'll pause there, see if there are any questions or discussion that you all want to have.
You know, the last time we had a Houston DevOps meetup before we had a hurricane was Hurricane Harvey. Like a couple days after we had the meetup, that Hurricane Harvey came through. So that's a nice memory. So when I'm looking at this, Adam, I'm thinking, you know, one of the challenges is, like, I know AWS pretty well. And so I know how to do this, that, or the other thing. Well, we have a big Azure footprint where I am right now. And so I know how to do it in the AWS. I know how to go to the IAM module and I know what I need to click and what I need to add. Azure, of course, I have to kind of fumble around a bit and figure out where things are. So it looks like if somebody sets this up wisely, they can abstract some of that frustration away and let people not have to know which buttons to click necessarily. More gives them the template to say, well, I just want a VPC in AWS. I'll just use the one that's pre-configured in here. Is that what Morpheus is trying to do?
Yeah, in large part, right? We want to make it and I hate the term single pane of glass, but I do think it is apropos in many ways. It's your single cloud abstraction endpoint. So what work you may want to get done, you can do it here. When I started thinking about some of what you're talking about, there are some workflows that have emerged around cloud practices that we can enable too with some of our deeper integrations into things like Terraform or ARM. So we do have integrations into templating cloud resources out that way. So if you need an RG or a new VPC, you know, we're not removing the ability for you to be able to get that. We're just kind of changing the modality a little bit. We want to capitalize on some of the best practices that allow you to do that, you know, in the cloud too. So that is still there. I think that, you know, what you're teasing at a little bit, and correct me if I'm wrong, is how we can start thinking more immutably about cloud resource provisioning. And IAC, I think, does enable that in large part.
Absolutely. It's hard enough to get queued up in one cloud technology, let alone all of them. But optionally, it's optionality that's going to wind up being the secret sauce, I think, in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and just to further that discussion a little bit too, one of the things that I've been pleasantly watching from the sidelines is what is happening with Kubernetes. So we talk about the hierarchy of needs of operations, and I mentioned, hey, cost is certainly one of them. And here we are, 2020 has caused kind of a great stir in a lot of companies who are depending on revenue and looking at ways that they can make things more affordable. I think it is pushing a Kubernetes adoption to the forefront. People are looking, how do I get resources out of cloud or get more control over cloud resources as quickly as possible? We're excited about that, but what Kubernetes actually lacks is its inclusion in business processes as well. So the fact that I can actually tie your cloud resource provisioning into your CMDB, that I can tie approval workflows from your ITSM tooling, and maybe even front end it with your ITSM tooling, kind of extends that capability into the enterprise space in a very meaningful way. We do have our cluster utility over here too. And this is a unique area of self-service because this is where dev and ops tend to mix quite a bit as we're marching forward. Whether they're providing the easy access to build ephemeral clusters, since we make it so simple and easy to do. We even include our own Kubernetes architecture. Or people are setting up multi-tenanted clusters and using Morpheus to help administer that. That is giving them a lot of flexibility around application definition that gives them more power over the financial bottom line as they're looking at DevOpsifying their worlds.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Well, very cool.
You guys are either easy or you're scared of the storm on its way.
A little bit of a distraction, I guess. Okay, cool. Well, great presentation. Really appreciate it. If you could indulge me, if you could, Adam, get to like a nice splash screen, if people could indulge me and turn on their cameras, I'd like to get a nice like screenshot that I can use for the, I'll post this video online to the DevOps channel there. So if everybody can turn on their cameras, I can get a nice screenshot. Got some good looking people out there.
Unfortunately, I think mine is asking for permission, so I'd have to restart Zoom to get mine to do that.
I finally figured out what's going on with mine. For all you people out there that are trying to figure out why Zoom can't see your camera, I had something else that had my camera on. So I was, jeez. Okay, so finally figured it out. Fantastic. Look at all those people. Wonderful people. You going to jump in there, James? James is a good-looking man. I don't want to leave him off.
Yeah, I'm trying to get it to work on my cell, but it's not having much luck.
All right. Well, awesome. Awesome presentation. Okay, guys. Well, thank you for jumping on. That is the Houston DevOps Meetup for August 2020. Be keeping an eye out for the board there. I'll be posting the next one in September there. And, everybody keep in mind, we are going to get through this year, man. I mean, 2 hurricanes at once. It's just 2020 is that year. I saw somebody post this. 2020 is that year that it never stops trying. It keeps pushing itself, right? So it's like, what can I do now? Okay, what about double hurricanes? We're going to make it. All we got to do is get through this election. Oh. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming on.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.